Empty the chamber on them. And how do you do that? First 6 seconds, point A to point B, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go.
Welcome to Scoreboard Order. We have a new quarterback in the fold. We have the coaches on the road. We have a giant tackle that we're going to watch some film of, transferred out of Georgia, potentially in the fold at Ohio State. We have all kinds of things going on. It is a wonderful time in Ohio State, and the Buckeyes have officially started winter conditioning under Mickey Marotti. So that is always a completely miserable experience. Oh, excuse me. The boys are back. They're going to get ground up pretty good. Get the that post bowl game sadness out of them real quick with some fun conditioning and a ton of weightlifting. So this is a good time of the year to get some reports on what guys are progressing. I think some guys have a little more pep in their step when there are some jobs open and some spots to be won. So we'll see who can rise to the top before 6 a.m. Workouts which start in the middle of February. So we will have all the details of that. We're going to break down our new quarterback. We're going to break down some recruiting news. We have a ton of offers going out. Most of them are real offers where they are committable. So a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff. Anytime we think that it's going to be a slow day in the land of Ohio State football, there's always an avalanche that comes out, and we always love bringing you all of the goods. So we appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. As always, we're very thankful for and grateful for you guys. Excuse me, my cursor is on my film setting. We're thankful for you guys every night. Thank you. Bang that like button. We appreciate you. Click the subscribe button if you guys enjoy these. Click the little bell for alerts. You'll get an alert every time we go live. We're trying to go live every night. We keep saying, hey, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? There's always stuff that pops up. So it makes it really fun. The portal, NIL, it is absolute craziness. And we try to give you guys a recap on everything that's going on and give you a little bit of the goods that's going on inside the Woody Hayes this time of the year. So with that being said, I'm going to bring in my good friend, Nevada Buck. Nevada, how are you today?
I'm doing good. You know, it's not every day that you get a 25-year-old transfer quarterback at Ohio State, so it's a happy 25th and a birthday quarterback day at Ohio State, which is a very exciting time.
Yeah, it's strange. Tristan Gibbia is a kid. He's 25, seventh year guy, wants to get into coaching. Obviously, that makes sense to go work for Ryan Day. At the rate that Ryan Day promotes from within, he'll probably be our defensive coordinator within 2 years. So he should just hang around the building, and I'm sure that he'll get promoted into a plush spot for Ryan. But I think that he fills a need. I think that most people would dread if he actually got in and played substantial minutes because he's only done about five. He's got about five touchdown passes in his career, but he, he's out of Calabasas, California, so he's cool like the Kardashians. But he, you need a camp arm, so to speak, for spring ball. With Lincoln Kienholz coming in the summer, you only had 2 scholarship quarterbacks, a walk-on. And, you're going to have to run 3 huddles because you've got a lot of skill guys you got to get looks at to see where they're at in the fold, especially these young wide receivers that graduated early. So getting a third quarterback was in here. But more importantly, I think you got to have that third guy here because, if one of the 2 quarterbacks feels like they're significantly behind a la Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow, you can see one transfer. And I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but if you're Ryan Day, in the age of the modern quarterback, none of these guys sit still. I'm just telling you. So you got to be prepared. I'm not saying that you want to go to fall camp with either Kyle McCord as your 1 or Devin Brown as your 1 and Tristan as your number 2, but you better have a veteran arm behind him in case the world ends, so to speak. Nevada, your reaction to bringing in a 7th-year quarterback, he's been around the world, Nebraska, Oregon State, out of the class of 2017, which seems insane. A long time ago. That was back when, JT was literally still senior at Ohio State in 2017. So that seems like an eternity ago. But your thoughts on our new quarterback, Tristan Gibbia?
I hope we don't ever need him. Having said that, in this, like you said, I don't know. I mean, will you ever see quarterback rooms where you have 3 and 4 viable quarterbacks anymore? I don't know. Things have changed so much. With this immediate, eligibility and transferring that I just think this is the reality. You're almost going to have to go. You're when you talk about a pair and a spare at the quarterback position, your spare is almost going to have to be a guy like, fitting a profile like this, because 3 QBs aren't going to be sitting there, eating up eligibility, waiting to see who's going to win the Derby. So I think you're going to see this more and more. We got a little glimpse of it with with Chugginoff and with Gunnar Hoke, but I think this is probably the wave of the future with transfers that come in, or older guys that are looking to get into coaching, looking to learn kind of the administrative side of the job. And in the meantime, they serve as kind of an emergency, backup quarterback and fill a need for a team like Ohio State. And I mean, let's not forget, in 2014, we won the national championship with our third string quarterback. So right now, he would be our third string quarterback. So until Kynals gets on campus in the fall, we don't have a third quarterback if he doesn't come here. So, for that reason and that reason alone, I'm glad we have him. I'm glad we have a third arm. You made the good point about, in the spring, you're throwing a lot of balls to a lot of talented wide receivers and skill position guys that want to catch it. And if you only have 2 guys throwing it, then, that's a problem as well. So, I think it fills the need, and, glad that he's there. And again, hope we don't ever need him.
Yeah, I agree. I'll take us into the film room. I pulled a little bit of tape. This is literally from high school. He has some college film, not a lot. But he is like I said, he's a class of 17. It's been a hot minute since he's been the man, been the starter. He's been a captain, actually, which is kind of incredible for as little as he's played. But, here he is, kind of nice easy pass. This isn't super high level ball. Calabasas is an ultra rich community, home to the Stars. But there was a time where he was a top 200 recruit. I believe he was a top 10 signal caller. Nebraska, Oregon State. You wonder why he wouldn't end up at like a UCLA or a Cal or a USC. But I mean, he's dropping it in there. I mean, it's fine. I think that. One big benefit to having Brian Hartline and Ryan Day as the guys orchestrating the offense is you have basically the best throwing game coach in the game in Ryan Day and the best, passing game guy in Brian Hartline working in concert. So if you're trying to get into coaching and you're trying to catch that sky, that rocket ship up to being a big time position coach, big time coordinator, big time head coach at a young age, this is a good place to be. I mean, Brian Hartline, obviously, started off as a quality control, being full-time wide receivers. Now he's the OC. Very young still, 36 years old. So that's relatively young. Ryan Day, head coach when he was 36, 37 at Ohio State, growing into the job. So, if you can learn from some guys that have been advanced, and if there's one thing that is in vogue in coaching right now, it is guys that are good at the throwing game. Like you see guys ascend to the stratosphere like Lincoln Riley, Cliff Kingsbury, Sean McVay. If you're a young coach and you want to go to the stratosphere early, learn the throw game, learn how to develop a quarterback. And if you're a quarterback and you don't have an ambition of being a professional, you don't have an ambition of playing in the NFL, this is a great place because he could, be a quarterback this year. He could be a graduate assistant next year, get his master's done, and then who knows? I mean, he could, be sitting here as a graduate assistant, and Brian Hartline could pop and become a head coach somewhere and take him with you as a quarterback coach. I mean, it's kind of how it works. If you're a young coach, you want to be in a program where there's a lot of people developing, there's a lot of people popping off, there's a lot of people, like for instance, Kevin Wilson going to Tulsa. A bunch of guys from Ohio State currently and from the past helped fill out his coaching staff. Guys that he didn't even know before, like Coy McFarland, that became his inside linebackers coach, a guy that he just met this year when Jim Knowles brought him from Oklahoma State. Matt Garriani, who was the DC at Duke and was an analyst this year for Ohio State, he became Kevin Wilson's defensive coordinator at Tulsa. So, if you're this guy and you can get around Brian Hartline, get around Keenan Bailey, get around Justin Fry, make a good showing. They like you, they teach you, they trust you. Then, if you're in coaching, that's where you want to be at. You want to be with these guys that are popping off and becoming full-time coaches. But yeah, I like the move. Again, it's more of a functional move because you need this isn't going to get people excited the way that, getting a Dylan Raiola committed or something like that would, but he's a kid that, he fills a need. You need a third arm for spring ball. We didn't have a third arm for spring ball. So it's a good get by Corey Dennis and Ryan Day. And I think this is a strategy that we're going to have to use going forward, where we're going to have to find a guy that maybe wants to get into coaching. Maybe he's a fifth-year guy. He can throw a football. He won't vomit all over the place if he has to run the offense late in the game. So again, I'm excited about it. Like, it'll be interesting to see what he does in the spring. I imagine if we throw 100 balls in the spring game, that Devin and Kyle are probably just going to throw 50, and this kid might throw 2. But that being said, it'll be interesting. Any final words on Tristan before we move on to big portal tackle Jacob Hood?
Yeah, no, just with like I said, I just think we're just going to have to get used to this. I think this is going to be kind of an annual rite of passage for Ohio State going forward, and just kind of the ways of college football in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, so we've had a very strange run in the portal. So this is a kid, Jacob Hood. He's out of Georgia. I'll shrink him down a little bit there. This is his recruiting. He says freshman year at Georgia this past year did not play at all. 6'8", 350. That is a little alarming to me, but you see his offers from literally 1 year ago. Georgia, A&M, LSU, Miami, Tennessee. And if this kid would have committed to Ohio State last year, despite being the lowly 3-star tackle, I think people would have been excited just based off of his offer sheet alone. But he's in the portal. Nevada, why do you think we've had so much difficulty trying to land a portal tackle when we have 2 open tackle spots currently?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that these guys are looking for guarantees that they're going to start, and Ohio State's just not in a position to do that. They've got enough guys that want to compete for those tackle spots. They've got enough guys that have started before, and so it's tough to get this, because every one of the guys wants a commitment that they're going to be starting. And Ohio State's just not, or I should say every one of the elite portal guys is, and Ohio State's just not in a position to extend an offer like that. And I think that it limits, their options regarding the portal, because you're going to have to come in and you're going to have to compete. You're going to have to beat a very busy offensive line room that's got a lot of dudes with a lot of experience, a lot of eligibility left. And, I look back, a lot of guys in the Ohio State offensive line room right now just haven't played just because they just haven't had the opportunity. And, had Harry Miller not had his incidents and he had started the last couple of years at center, we'd be wondering about this kid Luke Whippler and wondering if he could ever cut the mustard at Ohio State. When now he's a 3 and done and gone off to the league. So I think sometimes guys just need to have their opportunity, and I think portal guys are looking to make sure that they're going to have that opportunity. So it's a little bit of a conundrum.
These are always my favorite evals when you watch. So Jacob Hood's playing right tackle for his high school team, which is kind of a question mark, because why are you the best player on your O-line and you're playing right tackle instead of left tackle? It's not a huge deal, but it's always something that I always am curious about. But when you watch like the physical mismatches, so he's got Mark Pantoni here playing defensive end, and just like, so like when you're watching the film, obviously you expect a guy like that to dominate a guy who's 5'7" and 132 pounds or whatever playing DN, but. All you can do, it's like I say, that's why offensive linemen are so hard to evaluate in high schools, because they don't get to see Ohio State level or Georgia level or Alabama level defensive ends very often. If you live in the state of Ohio, you don't see them ever. You might see one guy a year in the entire state that is like that super high level premium defensive end. So, you got to evaluate, are these guys, can they adjust to playing versus, a similar talent level when they're playing against far inferior talent? Now, this kid's fishing now. He's playing left, so he's over to left tackle now. These guys might go quick and strong, which is where you flip sides based on the play call. But he's a finisher. That was the thing that kind of surprises me, because a lot of times you get these really big guys and they're not overly tough. They don't really finish. They don't run their feet. And when I watched this film earlier today, I liked that about him. I like that, he at least can run his feet a little bit. Again, he's got the frame, 6'8", 350. Now, major question is he still 350? Is he 380? Is he 330? I would imagine in Georgia's strength and conditioning program, they probably could keep his weight pretty close to where they'd like it to be. I can't imagine that you don't want this kid to get much higher than 350. But like there's a portal tackle, Kenyatta Goodwin right now, who's from Kentucky, who the whole world wanted, and he's almost 400 pounds now. He's 395 pounds, and he transfer portaled out of Kentucky. And again, people, they really wanted that guy, and they're like, oh my God, how are we ever going to survive without getting that guy? And I tell people, I'm like, look, you gotta understand, like, sometimes these kids, they're great in high school, whatever, but they get to college, man, and they get issues. And it could be drugs. It could be they don't go to class. For Kenyatta Goodwin, the kid out of Kentucky, he's like gained like 80 pounds since he got to campus, which is something that is almost impossible to do. But like, there's a reason why he's still in the portal, and he was a 4.5-star, high 4-star tackle last year, and he hasn't visited Alabama or Georgia or Clemson or Michigan or anywhere. And it's because, when these big guys come to campus, I know you guys always see them kind of walking around, meeting with the academic advisor, hanging with the players and all that. The first thing we make these big guys do when they walk into the Woody Hayes is get on a scale, and obviously sometimes they'll have clothes on and whatever, so you can subtract 15 pounds for the jeans and the sweat jacket and the hoodie and whatever else they're wearing. But, you want to see if their weight is anywhere near what it's prescribed to be or what they tell you it is, because that could be a big alarming thing. And it's not everything, but it is a something, because, guys that have weight problems in high school can have weight problems their entire life. And that's something NFL guys evaluate really hard is, if we draft this guy and make him a millionaire, is he going to eat less or is he going to eat more? And so, but this kid has the frame. Nevada, you've watched a few clips of him. Would you take him at this point and add him to the offensive line room?
Again, with the condition that he wasn't guaranteed a starting position, absolutely. I think a guy that's on, given Ohio State's success with a recent large body like DeJuan Jones, which had every issue that you talked about, position, level of play, weight control, motor, finish. He had every one of those issues, and they were able to coach it out of him and coach some really good football out of him, coach him into an NFL player. So I would certainly take a chance on a big body like that, give him a chance in the room, and just increase your depth and increase your options. But I think that's all Ohio State needs right now, is to have viable options. And to me, the right guard or right tackle, left tackle thing doesn't concern me as much. What position did you play in high school, Mr. Barton?
Tight end.
See, there you go. See,
there you go. That's right.
So and so like All-American tackle, plays tight end. So the fact that you played right tackle doesn't bug me as much. And I think for a guy that massive, worth a shot. And I think Ohio State could do wonders with somebody like that.
And here's the thing. I'll be honest with you guys. I know I'm hard on guys with weight problems when they're young, but a lot of these guys come from terrible backgrounds. Like, they don't have the money to eat healthy, eat organic, eat salads, so they're eating trash. They're Doritos and Mountain Dew and that kind of stuff. Like, I've seen it all, and I've seen some massive success stories from kids that were really heavy in high school. Thayer Munford was a kid really heavy as a sophomore, whittled it down his senior year. He was, 315, 320, fantastic Ohio State Buckeye, got the Blanco Award, captain, draft pick, should have been probably a 3rd-round pick, went late 7th round, played a bunch for the Raiders this year, is going to have a long NFL career. DeWand is a guy, and again, Thayer was a guy that Stud literally jumped up and down on the table to get into the class. People didn't want Thayer. Thayer was too low star, didn't have big offers. It was Iowa State, Pitt, and Ohio State. So, when we signed him, everybody yawned, everybody him-hawed, said, oh God, we got a fat project kid from Massillon. Didn't play his senior year because of a transfer issue. Played like 1 or 2 games for Massillon that year. And he turned into one of the best Buckeyes ever. He made the most selfless move in Ohio State history. Went from being a first-team All-Big Ten left tackle to playing guard, a position he never played before, and didn't play that well, and he still made first-team All-American his senior year playing guard. Another weight guy, DeWand, was big project, big athlete, basketball player. Can you get him strong enough? Can you get him focused enough? Those big guys that get tired, They get lazy. I still think DeJuan could lose 20 pounds and be much more effective than he is now. But he was still first team All-American by some services, second team All-American by most, first team All-Big Ten. I mean, the kid had a decorated, fantastic career, 4 years and out. You know, I mean, he actually had an extra year of eligibility where he could play a fifth year, and he probably could have won the Outland if he stayed one more year and played left tackle. But, you know, so there's two guys. And then my favorite one of all time is in 2012, a young kid named Orlando Brown Jr. From Peachtree Ridge, Georgia, showed up during spring break. And the only guys in the entire building at the time were me and Everett Withers. So I got assigned to take Orlando Brown Jr. around it. And his dad played for the Browns. He was the guy that famously got hit in the eye with the beanbag. And Kenny Parker, who I love to death, who is a strength coach at Ohio State currently, literally, we got Orlando Jr. on the scale, and it was like 395, and he was like 6'8". And he wasn't a bodybuilder. There was a lot of pudding on that body. But that kid, you know, I loved him. Tom Herman hated him. You know, Pantone hated him. Basically all of the recruiting people hated him because they thought he was too fat, which he was at the time. But, you know, he worked, you know, he committed to Tennessee. Tennessee had a coaching change. They pulled the rug out from under him on signing day and didn't sign him. So then he ends up at Oklahoma. And he famously came in here and beat us. You know, we beat them out there, but then when he came in the Baker Mayfield flag game, he was the left tackle, made first team All-American. Then he had the worst combine of all time, ran like a 6'8" 40. And then, you know, he gets drafted, goes to the Ravens. He's made like 4 Pro Bowls, just made another Pro Bowl, and he's the left tackle for Pat Mahomes now. So, you know, sometimes you just never know. I loved that kid, but, you know, when you're a GA, you don't have any yank to go on a guy like that. But it's just always funny, you know, when you see these guys with big weight problems, you know, you kind of get to see what they're made of and see how hard they want to work. So if they want to work and they're 6'8", like no matter what I do, I can't be 6'8". I'm 6'4". So 6'8" is over 6'4" every day of the week at tackle. So we're going to move on to a kid that reminds me of me a little bit. Nevada, any closing thoughts on my big fat tackle discussion that I had for you? You're probably loving these little tangents.
Well, I just wish that you had thrown yourself on the table and threatened to quit if they didn't offer Orlando Brown Jr. That would have been one of the great stories.
Oh, God.
Instead, you folded like a cheap tent and went and got a sandwich from Jersey Mike's and went along your way, you know?
They would have handed me a sub sandwich and a taxi cab ride home and said, go F off. But, like, it was funny because, like, the day of the game when we played in the shoe, I was texting. I still talk to him. And it's funny, like, you know, I'm just like, dude, I'm so proud of that kid because he was such a nice kid. And his dad was one of my favorite NFL players ever. And it was just like, you know, his dad passed away. You know, I mean, he got real heavy, diabetes, bad stuff. But like, I loved his dad. But this was a really intriguing kid that his name's Ted Hammond, and he's actually out of St. X. And we don't have any offensive tape of him. But, you know, what I do all day, guys, when I'm studying this and trying to set a show up for you guys is I kind of look around at, you know, who are some guys that Ohio State's got a debate on going on? Who are some guys that they've recently offered? This is a kid named Ted Ham. He's out of Cincinnati St. Xavier. He's a defensive tackle. He's got Oklahoma. He's got Michigan as his committable offers so far. But God, I think he'd be a good offensive tackle. He's about 6'6", you know, 270. Great frame, really athletic kid. And he plays tight end too. So you see a little bit of tight end, but you know, the movement skills and stuff, I think that, you know, in his head, he probably thinks he's going to be JJ Watt or a kid like that. But, you know, if you really, you know, look at the movement skills and you imagine that as an offensive tackle, that's where I would get more excited, more so than as a defensive lineman. I think D-line, you know, maybe, I mean, and I'm not sure if, I imagine Oklahoma and these guys are all taking him as a D lineman, but you know, this could be like one of those ones, like a classic, like a Billy Price, where we say he's a D lineman, and you know, the second day that he's at Ohio State, we switched him to O-line because we had him on the O-line board the whole time when we were recruiting him, and that's what this kid reminds me of. Because I think that this kid, if he embraced being an offensive lineman, I think he'd be really good at it. Because again, the movement skills are there. He's tough. He comes off the ball, nice pad level. But again, this is like more of a projection. And again, when you're doing this as a Justin Fry, as an offensive line coach for Ohio State, sometimes you got to look at some guys and say, I think I'd take that guy and put him in number 75 instead of number 97 and see what she can do with him. Because again, he's got a big frame, he's got great quickness. And again, you know, you got to imagine it was kind of like my situation where I would have been an average defensive lineman from an athleticism standpoint, but I was a really athletic offensive tackle. Like, so it's like, you know, would you rather be like a premium guy in terms of your athleticism or just like an average guy? Because, you know, I think most of the guys Larry's want, you know, for the D line, they're a little bit more twitched up than this. But I like this kid's motor. Like, I think he plays hard. I really like this film. He's really productive. Comes from a big school in St. Xavier. And again, like, you know, when he gets an offer like Oklahoma and he gets an offer like Michigan, you know, it speeds up the clock for Ohio State in terms of offering a kid. You know, it's one thing if he's sitting there and he has, you know, Pitt and Michigan State and Purdue, but when Oklahoma dives in, then all of a sudden it's a whole different ball of wax because that's a national school. And a lot of times, you know, when an Oklahoma dives in and a Michigan dives in, then that makes, you know, a Clemson pay a little bit more attention, LSU a little bit more attention, Notre Dame. So yeah, but I like this kid. I figured I'd throw him up here. Cause again, we've got to take 5, maybe even 6 linemen, between high school and portal next year to replenish this room. Cause I think we'll have a couple of transfers. You know, Matt Jones obviously is going to be gone. Donnie could go pro. So this is going to be a huge recruiting class for Justin Fry. I'm also going to break down, we have a big tackle, Jordan Seton, who I really like. You know, again, I was breaking down film today, just kind of figuring out, you know, some guys to talk about tonight. And, you know, this is a kid, and Jordan Seaton's a kid that I think that we lead for. I think he'd be a fantastic get for Ohio State. He's a true tackle. But yeah, I don't know. I just, it's going to be interesting because, you know, when you're looking for guys that are big enough and can pass protect, sometimes like the athletic traits don't necessarily come from high school, high school offensive tackle film. It comes from watching a defensive end or a tight end run around. And, you know, that's why I thought Luke Lachey would have been a great tackle. I know he went to Iowa and ended up being a tight end, but I'd take him back tomorrow if he wanted to transfer here and play tackle for us in the next 2 years or so. Nevada, what do you think? Do you think that the projection thing is tougher? Is it better to take a true offensive lineman? It's a different spot, but I'd love to hear your opinion on it because you've been around recruiting for 25-ish years. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's like I look at it almost like a portfolio of stocks where, you know, you're investing in some blue chips, you're investing in some mid caps, you're investing in some, you know, more speculative type of things. And, you know, if I was Ohio State, you know, specifically on the offensive line and no other position, I would be looking at tight ends or converted defensive linemen to see how they might, you know, convert over to, you know, be an effective offensive lineman for you. Because I think that's where you could really find some diamonds in the rough. That's where you could really, you know, get some A+ players. And Ohio State, I would make that, you know, it wouldn't be, you know, my primary strategy, but it would be part of my strategy for sure. Much like we talked about, moving, you know, nobody really recruits fullbacks, but, you know, moving guys like a Mitch Rossi or a Reed Carrico or something like that fullback, you know, I'd be looking at, you know, maybe a couple of scholarships a year for, you know, a defensive lineman or that tight end that could move on and potentially be a tackle, and be your development projects. But I would constantly have development projects in the work because, again, I think the upside's huge and the competition for these kids would be less. And I think that you'd have a real chance to really hit some home runs.
Yeah, I do too. I think if, you know, and again, I don't even know if the kid would be open to it, but I've seen this movie enough times that when I watch a kid like that, you know, again, he thinks he's going to be JJ Watt. He thinks he's going to be, you know, a twitched up, you know, DN 3 technique. But, you know, he gets into college, he gets to 290, 295, and all of a sudden you're like, man, if you go play tackle, you could be a gazillionaire, or you could play and be a plugger, you know, playing, you know, NFL football as a defensive tackle. You know, when a guy can run, it changes everything. And when a guy's twitched up and he's explosive coming off the ball, that means that he can usually get into a fit and drive block. So I don't know. I'd think a kid like that, it just makes so much sense. So, but this next kid I put on, this is Jordan Seton. This kid he's kind of all everything. He's a kid that I know that we're really high on. Let me flick his film on real quick. I'm going to run it for you guys, and I'll break a couple clips down. But he's a guy, he's out at left tackle. He's a dominant kid, man. I really like his tape. But this is a guy that I know Justin Fry's all over. He's almost, I don't want to say he's a must-have, because I don't think that anybody's a must-have unless he's a Paris Johnson type kid, Paris or Orlando Pace type kid. But, Jordan, out of St. John's, he's a DC kid, projected, crystal ball to Ohio State by our boy. He got the Fong bomb from Whit Fong. So, but he's he's a guy that fills the need. He's got Bama as an offer, which I know that makes everybody excited. If we can never beat Bama on anybody, that's like an exciting day in our lives. But he's a big nasty kid, man. And again, it's and this is a year ago, so this isn't even his junior film. This is some sophomore film. I asked him if he's gonna upgrade and get his senior tape out, and he says they're working on it right now. So when he has some senior tape, I will break that down too. But Nevada, this is it's just funny because our message board is obsessed with offensive tackles and what tackles are we getting and how are we ever going to survive at tackle. I never worry about it because I think it always works itself out, and we can always find a tackle. And I'm really surprised that we've gone over in the portal looking for tackles. But again, if we're not going to promise a guy a job, which I think is the correct method of doing it, this is kind of what you got to do. And I think personally, as a guy that's played tackle, I think if you put Donnie and Josh Fryer at left and right tackle, I think we'll be fine. I really do. And I'm not saying that just to placate and make people feel better. I genuinely feel that. I think that those guys are 2+ athletes. Two guys that can pass protect. Donnie played tackle in high school, so it's not like it's some radical switch. Really, him playing guard, I think, was harder than playing tackle, just because he played tackle his whole life. Just like most of the best offensive linemen on everyone's team, they always play tackle. They usually don't play inside at guard. But yeah, I think Jordan Seaton's going to be a really, really good get for us when we get the commitment. Again, we're big leaders in this one. But your thoughts on him so far, Nevada?
Well, I think it'd be the first national offensive line recruit that we've gotten during Justin Fry's tenure. So that'd be good, kind of a nice slump buster from that standpoint. And no, I think he'd be terrific. As for the offensive line, we've talked about this a million times, kind of like running the quarterback thing. We're tired of hearing about it, but I've been hearing the concerns about the offensive line for 20 years now. Literally every season for 20 years in a row, I've heard from the same chorus of people. I'm worried about the offensive line. This is the year I'm worried about the offensive line. And they're 0 for 20 for the past 20 years. So I think at some point we got to stop worrying about it, move on to another topic. Let's all worry about cornerbacks, replace kickers together. But I think we can put a pin in worrying about the offensive line until we at least have a bad offensive line, because cornerback play, we had bad cornerback play this year, and there's no guarantee that it's going to be any better next year. So let's all say silent prayers that we get cornerbacks and stop worrying about the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at the offensive line, there's a lot of ways to help the offensive line. There's a lot of ways, if you got some young guys and you're trying to help them get their sea legs when they're out there, there's some effective play calls. There's some ways to, just hide it. Like, again, like Urban Meyer, who I revere, talked about, when you're going against a really good front like Georgia, there's about 15 plays you can call where you don't have to block anybody. There's screens, draws. There's naked bootlegs where, the guys just turn sideways and the quarterback kind of bootlegs out the back end and throws a little drag route. There's like a bunch of things like that where you can make it easy. You can chip, you can slide protection. You can get a guy like, Mitch Rossi against Georgia was absolutely out of his mind good versus the Georgia's guys in pass protection. We were short at running back, especially from a pass protection standpoint. And Mitch Rossi, they put him at running back, and he was just an absolute animal. One of the best games I've ever seen an Ohio State guy play. Played as hard as anybody we've ever had in the program. So big shout out to Mitch Rossi. But you can help out some of these young guys, and I think that's why I'm genuinely not worried. Getting Matt Jones back was huge. I think that there's no reason he can't match Luke Whippler's production at center. Luke was a 3-and-out guy. Again, a year and a half ago, going into camp, he wasn't even projected to start. I mean, Harry Miller was projected to start. I went to practice. I remember, Harry had some bad snaps. He was kind of rotating in with Luke, but nobody thought Luke was going to play. And then, Harry obviously wasn't able to go during the season, quit the team, or didn't quit the team, kind of retired from the team. And Luke stepped right in, and we didn't miss a beat. And nobody was, oh my God, who's this Luke Whippler guy? I remember James Yoder made like a kind of a funny tweet, like who's going to buy a Luke Whippler hoodie? And it turns out that guy's really good. He's going to be 3-and-out, and he's going to be a mid-round NFL draft pick. So, sometimes you just never know. Because like you said earlier in the show, if Harry Miller doesn't have his episode and he plays, through his senior year, which would have been this past year, then nobody knows who Luke Whippler is. And we're going into this spring, and people are saying, well, God, I don't know. Like, we've got Luke Whippler in at center now, and we lose Harry Miller, and I don't know if we're going to be any good because we got Luke Whippler and Matt Jones and Donnie Jackson. And, it's like you never know until these guys actually show up and play. And that's kind of the fun part about college football is like there's always, it's like playing poker. You're always going to be throwing some cards back, even if you don't want to. And then all of a sudden you got to roll with whatever hand you're dealt. And that's kind of the beauty of what spring ball is. It's the beauty of winter conditioning. 6 a.m.s, you get to see what guys really want to put it on the line. Because now when guys have, spots at stake and they get a chance to start, guys start eating better, they get in better shape, they really want to show out for conditioning. You literally treat every day like it's a game. Like when you're going into the workout, you're working out against your competition, like you want to beat them in everything. You want to be bench heavier, squat heavier, beat them in the sprints, because it all adds up. Because you want, if Ryan Day walks down to Coach Mick and says, hey, who showed out today, who did good today, and they say, man, you should see Josh Fryer, man, you should see him run, man, you should see Jacob James, he was an animal today. Like that's the kind of like vibe, because all of that carries over into spring ball. I mean, there's very few guys that are dogs in the winter workouts that end up taking a spot during spring ball. So I like it. I know that Urban took it to a different level in terms of making everything competitive, from the weight room to the drills. We do agilities, we do 6 a.m. sprints, we do all kinds of stuff, and they monitor everything. So it's like at the end of the day, there's a big scoreboard that says, this is how many Donnie Jackson won, this is how many Jacob James won, this is how many Tigra won, this is how many Josh Fryer won. So it's always fun. I always like that stuff because I felt like, instead of guys, staying up late and being groggy for the workout and not eating right, those guys they'd show up sharp because, when it's all different when you keep score, the way that we did with Urban and the way I'm sure Mickey and Ryan Day still do now, because, guys want to win. You don't want to be the guy at the bottom of the leaderboard because you had a bad day or you only got 4 hours of sleep or whatever. So it's exciting. I genuinely get excited to hear kind of who's showing out during winter workouts. I'll talk to some of my homies that are in there and they'll kind of let me know this guy looks great, this guy's not doing great, this guy skipped 10 workouts, this guy, it's always interesting to see the guys that miss workouts at this time of year because there's always a couple of them, and then you can kind of just move them down the depth chart and you'll hear Nevada Buck and I talk about them less and less on BuckeyeScoop.com. But any thoughts on what I just was talking about Nevada in terms of the winter workouts and how it leads into momentum through spring ball?
Well, no, I think you're right on that. I think this is when we really start to see who's kind of building the momentum and kind of building up towards a big 2023. And 2023 is, we've talked about this every day. I'm super excited about the team. Can't wait to see the group and the people that I talk to inside the program, outside the program, around the program. They're all excited. They think that this team's poised for a big year. Got a lot of great weapons. Got a lot of great news. Back from the people staying one more year and not going to the NFL early. And we didn't really have any catastrophic losses in that area. Some the bad losses like the Jalen Marshall or the Michael Jordan, or the ones that are kind of come out of nowhere, kind of somewhat unexpected. So no, Ohio State's poised for a good one, but it all starts now. It's in the winter warm-ups and the workouts, and can the guys really kind of build up that momentum, build it into spring ball, and carry that momentum through the summer and into the fall? But we'll have a front row seat, that's for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that when there's change, and again, like when you have a new offensive coordinator and a new energy, I'm sure Brian's going to want to come in and set the tone early and go hard and be aggressive because, excuse me, when you're the guy now, because again, Brian's never been the guy. He's been the receivers coach, so the receivers all look at him. But now he's the guy. He's the guy that the whole offense is going to be looking at. He's the guy that's going to give the speech. He's the guy that's going to make the adjustments. And, it'll be exciting to see, what he changes. Because sometimes when you're sitting in that staff room and you're the receivers coach, you're like, man, I wish we could do it this way. Or, man, I wish if I could do it, I'd do it this way. Now he's got the chance. Kevin Wilson's gone. I'm sure that, Brian is going to, he's obviously going to answer to Ryan Day. I mean, it's still Ryan Day's offense. Like, that's not going to change. It's still the Ohio State offense, which is produced by Ryan Day. But, Brian's going to be, handed the controls, and provided he, does within reason what Ryan Day wants, then, he's going to have pretty much free reign. And then you have Justin Fry running the running game. And it'll be really interesting to see how those two work together, because I know Justin Fry inherently well, and I know what he believes in. And, when you have an offensive coordinator that has more of a passing game background like Brian Hartline, obviously a wide receiver at Ohio State, wide receiver with the Miami Dolphins and the Cleveland Browns, they tend obviously to go more heavy in the passing game. But, before we had Kevin Wilson, Kevin Wilson's an offensive lineman, played offensive line at North Carolina, coached offensive line for years at Miami of Ohio, Northwestern, Oklahoma, Indiana. He was a head coach, but that was an O-line driven program. And when Urban hired him, he was a big add to the offensive line. So, when I went to practice and I saw him and Greg Suar working together, like, he had a lot of hands on working the O-line because he was an O-line guy. And I think he's a really good technical O-line guy. He coached Trent Williams at Oklahoma. So, obviously, you're going to run the ball more when you have an O-line driven guy. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that works. Defensively, obviously it's always interesting. And you made a great point about the corners, because I'm with you. I'm more concerned about the corners than any other room, maybe times 10, just because of how erratic they were last year. How we didn't have an interception. I've heard some rumblings about that room not being very settled right now. Nevada, is it interesting that people are generally more worried about the offensive line this year than the cornerback room?
I mean, I think it's weird. I think it's weird that we even talk about it in the same breath, because in one area we've got legitimate concerns. We've seen. I mean, I don't think Ohio State. I don't know the exact stat. I'd have to go back and look at this, but I would dare say that there's never been a year in the history of Ohio State where there was not a single interception by a cornerback. And that happened. That happened last year. So, that's it's just it's weird. It's concerning, and it's especially perplexing given you could make an argument for Ohio State being DBU in the NFL. And all of a sudden, we've just kind of fallen off the map with that. And like I said, it's hard to really kind of point exactly when or where or how we kind of got to this point, but we're there. And I generally, I'm not trying to be Chicken Little about it, but I think it's something that it's definitely worthy of conversation. It's definitely worthy of attention, and it's going to be one of the things I'm going to be watching, really closely in the spring is who can step up, who can kind of emerge. I think we've talked about the QB derby, about Brian Hartline stepping into the offensive coordinator role. Those are both just great storylines. But the third one is cornerbacks. Like, who are the cornerbacks? Because I'm not worried about the D-line, I'm not even worried about the safeties as much, and I'm not worried about the linebackers at all. But got to find some guys that can cover and make some plays, and got to get that figured out.
Yes. So those you watch on YouTube, this is JJ Smith, Shamana Madonna, likely the number one player in the country for the class of 2024. He's a South Florida Express kid. Sometimes, like, again, when I feel like getting excited about the future of Ohio State, I remember that, in a year, everyone's going to be worried, about Marvin and Emeka walking out, going pro. But this kid is going to come in and start as a freshman. I'm just telling you, JJ Smith's probably the best player in the country, regardless of class. So I just throw his tape up here. Looks like Julio Jones. If you Google him, it's Jeremiah Smith, goes by JJ. And this kid is all Buckeye. He's a guy that, Ennis and Tate are his guys. He's got kind of the lead dog in our recruiting class right now. So I just throw his tape up as we kind of talk and go through the roster, go through kind of what's going on in the Woody Hayes right now. But this is a special kid, man. I am so excited about this kid. So again, if you watch his film, anytime you're ever having a bad day and you're an Ohio State fan, put on some JJ Smith and you'll be like, thank God this guy's coming our way. He'll probably be our ex receiver. He'll probably take Marvin's spot the second he gets to campus. But yeah, it's weird because, when I played, I was fortunate during my 5-year run at Ohio State. I played with a couple of the best corners that ever played at Ohio State. Chris Gamble, Malcolm Jenkins. I mean, those guys were absolute animals, complete dogs, guys that were really tough to go against. And, and then, when I coached, Eli Apple, Gary Conley, Marshawn, a little bit later, knew those guys in recruiting. Obviously, Ward. We've had some guys that have not only been fantastic, but they've been, top 5 picks, $20 million a year extensions, Pro Bowlers, all pro. And now it's just strange. It's really weird because now it's like the guys, I don't know if it's that they lack confidence. Their coach, Tim Walton's the guy that coached Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey lauded praise on how good he was technically, which kind of piqued my interest early in the season because Jalen Ramsey is the highest paid corner in the NFL. And he said how much Tim Walton meant to his career, how much Tim Walton meant to developing him as a young player, how hard he was on him. When Jalen Ramsey shows up, he's a top 5 pick from Florida State. And, you got to kind of, beat the beast back into the cage sometimes when you're dealing with a guy like that who, is a very heady, talkative kid. But Tim Walton handled him great. But something's amiss in that room. We've had multiple transfers. We've missed on portal guys. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Again, Jim Schwartz is a guy that he's worked with ad nauseum, and he just got the defensive coordinator job in Cleveland. Again, so I'm not saying that that's something that could happen, but you never know. When I was with the Detroit Lions and then Jim Schwartz was the head coach, Tim Walton was the cornerbacks coach. So again, you never know sometimes with guys that have been longtime NFL guys and what their potential, if they want to go back to the NFL. Because frankly, if I was a football coach, I think the NFL is a far better job than being a college coach, just because you don't recruit, you don't deal with NIL. You really don't even have to deal with the roster because for the most part, the general manager and the owner brings in the players, and you just have to figure out how to coach them. So that's a double-edged sword because when you're in college, you're generally responsible for your room, for recruiting your room, for developing your room. But if you're a cornerbacks coach for the Browns and the owner goes and pays whoever, say they trade for Marshawn Lattimore, and he pays him $20 million, you got to figure out a way to coach that guy. It's not like college where you could bench the guy and he can hit the portal and he's gone. It's like once the owner pays the guy, it's on you to figure out how to coach him. So, but Nevada, is there any other position on the team that you're excited to see how they develop from a depth perspective, much like corner? Because I'm really excited to see some of these young D linemen. Some of these linebackers, it's tougher with the linebackers only running 2 linebackers at a time with the 4-2-5 defense. But are there any other positions that you're really looking forward to seeing develop through winter conditioning and spring ball?
Well, no, but I think it kind of goes to one of your earlier points, and I'll kind of tie together about 4 different thoughts here all at once. But you talked about the great Chris Gamble, and we all know how important he was to Ohio State's last national, not last national, but previous national championship. I mean, without him, we don't win it. Period. And end of story. And he was a converted wide receiver. So we talk about these position changes and these diamonds in the rough, and we've also we talked last night about some of these young wide receivers here for these last 2 recruiting classes that haven't really made an impact at wide receiver. And so I guess I'd pose the question: could any of them be cornerbacks? Could any of them switch? I know that sounds crazy, but could any of them switch to the other side of the ball and be standout cornerbacks? Because most of those guys played that position in high school. They're not making a move. You've got a loaded wide receiver room, that just with Marvin and Emeka and Julian and Ennis and Tate and the Rogers brothers. And could we see a move like that in the future? I don't know, but it'd be something interesting to think about, because it's not like it's unprecedented at Ohio State, and it's not like it wasn't done. I'm sure Chris Gamble is pretty happy that he moved from wide receiver to cornerback. That probably made him, what do you make, $100 million in the NFL? So I think he did all right with that move.
Yeah, I totally agree. If I was someone who was equally skilled playing receiver or corner, I would play corner all day, just because I think that it's a higher upside position. There's a scarcity factor in the NFL. If you could play good corner, man, you're gonna make a fortune. If you're a good wide receiver, you're kind of in that mix of just being a guy. Really, even the top tier receivers, they don't get paid nearly what the top tier corners do. It's just a scarcity thing. I think JoJo Trader, who's actually JJ's teammate and likely Buckeye from Shaman Madonna, he's the guy that's going to have to make that decision. Does he want to stick it out and be a receiver, go into that loaded room, or does he want to be a corner? And, some of the Southfield Express guys I talk to, they say if he dedicates himself to being a corner, he's going to be a fantastic corner. He's going to be a guy that, will play early. He's got great traits for it. Change of direction, competitive. I think the biggest thing, I always admired corners because I feel like playing corners is a lot like playing offensive tackle, because you're out on an island and you can't have a real long memory, because if you ever get beat, you can't let that compound into just multiple beatings. It was when we watched Michigan in 2018, the Dwayne Haskins game, Urban's final game in the shoe. Michigan had a corner that was the fish, and he was the guy they got beat to death by Ryan Day and by Urban. Just absolutely fantastic day, because they found the corner that wasn't ready to go, and he stunk. So they beat him to death all day. And with a corner, it's a lot harder to hide than it is. It's a tackle or a guard or a center or really any other position on the field. Because if you're having a bad day at corner, man, it's like compounding interest, man. It's a very powerful thing for the coordinator to figure out that this corner has no confidence, and we've got Emeka and Marvin coming to wear you out on every single play. So it's always interesting. I think that J.K. Johnson leaving, it stinks. I didn't think he wasn't very good when he played last year, but it's just from a depth perspective. I worry if we get an injury or two, we get a hamstring or two, how do we practice if we don't have enough corners? So that's something. We've got a really, really nice injection of talent coming in per on 3, which has some pretty wonky recruiting ratings. We actually have the top 2 corners in the nation coming in. So that'll be interesting to see. And those guys are here early, and they're going to get a baptism by fire when they get to go out in 7-on-7 and see Emeka and Marvin and the rest of the crew. So, yeah, Jaheim Singletary, he's not going to be a Buck. He's going to be likely Florida State. Yeah, Kenyatta Goodwin, that's a great thing. If any of you guys have any questions as we wrap this thing up, Kenyatta Goodwin, it's interesting you bring him up, because he was a guy that people were projected to be in the transfer portal, cleaned out all the stuff from his Twitter. So generally when people do that, like Dylan Raiola did, people think that they're out. But I talked to some people in the program. They said he is not out, and he's actually a really good player, and he's a guy that's got a bright future. Again, we need pass rush worse than anything in the world. So I don't know why, given our dearth of pass rush last year, and the guys that have moved on, why would you ever transfer if you're a defensive end at Ohio State at this point? We lose Zach Harrison, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Tyler Friday. Nice players. No werewolves in that group. I mean, Zach Harrison had a nice year. The other two guys are just kind of guys. So it cleans up, it opens up a lot of snaps for some of these young guys that want to rotate in with JT and Jack Sawyer at the defensive end positions. And I'm telling you, if we can figure out a way to manufacture some pass rush, that'll be the key to getting our corners a little bit more of a shorter fuse, where they can trigger and potentially get some more interceptions. So I think that, that all works in concert. The coverage along with the pass rush is something that both I didn't think were what we projected last year. I thought that we would have had probably mid 40 sacks. We ended up in the mid 30s, which is fine. It's more than Georgia. Georgia had 25. We had 34, 35-ish. But I thought we'd be in the mid 40s, and I thought we'd have more turnovers. I thought we'd turn the ball over with Jim Knowles' aggressive defense. But that comes out our corners getting some picks. You projected that they'd have 5 to 10 picks, given how often we are up in games, how often we're in the throw game. You'd assume that these guys would be pretty ready to go and get their hands on the balls, but it just wasn't something to see. So we got some questions coming here, Nevada. It's not Dave Rice. That was actually my mom calling. It's pretty funny. Yeah, I think Simpson Hunt is really nasty. He's a kid that rocketed up the rates. Nevada, your thoughts? Is Chip going back to linebacker or staying in the running back room?
I think it depends on what happens with guys like Evan Pryor, and are there any other transfers, any other movement, how the health is. But I think it's a great question. I think it's an open question right now. I know he came to Ohio State to play linebacker, but the bottom line is he's not going to play linebacker next year. So I think if I had to bet, I'd say he stays in the running back room. But I think that's an open question right now and subject to change after spring ball.
All right, Tyleek Williams is the guy that we talk about probably as much as any guy on the entire team. Tyleek, per Pro Football Focus, which is a very, it's an interesting grading service. I like it because it's a data point. It's something else to talk about. They graded him out as the second best player on the field for our defense versus Georgia, behind, of course, Zach Harrison, who I think founded Pro Football Focus. But Tyleek is a guy, every time I see him, I'm like, why does he not play more? Because he's always a load for guys to try to block. But then he only plays 10 plays. So it's kind of like you're giving the interior offensive lineman like the day off by putting in Jerron Cage and Teron Vincent and guys that are much easier to block. So now that those guys are gone, I don't know how you could not play Tyleek and Mike Hall 50 out of the 70 snaps. But again, it comes down to Tyleek, especially, when he's heavy and he gets winded, he's got to be able to play 40, 45 snaps for us to be successful. Mike Hall, on the other hand, is extremely fit. He's a gym rat. So it'll be interesting to see how those guys get that uptick. Yeah, Jack Sawyer is a guy that he's kind of we talked yesterday about Tommy Eichenberg. So Tommy Eichenberg was a guy at this time last year who most people probably had in the same category as Jack Sawyer, where they're just like, not good, not productive, get him off the field, overrated, whatever. And then Jim Knowles showed up, and Tommy turned out to be really, really good. And he's the heart and soul of our defense, if not our team. And he's a guy that'll be a projected first-team All-American this year. I think Jack Sawyer could have that same trajectory. Now that he's going to be a starter, he's not just going to be playing the jack. I think that, the way that they did this silly rotation where he was the starter at jack, but Zach Harrison and JT are starters at end, it just was kind of wonky. And I think you just got to play him at defensive end and stop messing with the kid and having him play linebacker essentially when he plays that jack position. Because I don't, when we ran it, it was never effective. It wasn't, the design that people expected it like at Oklahoma State. And I think a lot of it's because you see different types of running packages in the Big Ten compared to the Pac-12. We see a lot more tight end stuff, a lot more heavy stuff. The Illinois, Michigan State stuff. Much different from like what Oklahoma likes to do, Baylor, whole different world. So I don't like the jack stuff. I think that it's kind of gimmicky. I think that We got shredded when we ran it a few times against Michigan. We ran it and they went for 75. Against Georgia, we ran it. They went for 70. I would keep Jack's hand in the dirt, let him come off the edge. I think that's where he's most comfortable at. Let him wreck the tackle. So hopefully that'll be his trajectory going forward. Nevada, your thoughts on what we can get out of Jack Sawyer going forward, and what do we need out of him for 2023 to be successful?
Well, I mean, again, he led the team in sacks this year. So, I mean, as bad as it was, let's keep it in perspective. And look, he just has a normal trajectory, like nothing extraordinary. He doesn't drink the secret sauce. He doesn't discover the fountain of wonderment, or he doesn't, nobody works some magic with him. I mean, he'll go from 4.5 to 9 or 10 this year. And, we get that. We talked about this before. You get 10 sacks out of him and 10 out of JT, and you've got a pretty good defensive end right there. So, no, I think he'll have a big year. I think the second year in the Knowles defense works wonders. And I also agree with you on the Jack defense stuff. I was optimistic that it was going to be a little bit more disruptive. It wasn't. It was disruptive, but it would seem more disruptive to our flow on defense. And I think, I'm not saying scrap it all together, but I think they need to come up with a different scheme or different players or different utilization on that, because by any measure it didn't work last year, and when things aren't working, I think you got to get rid of them.
I agree. Nevada, you think Josh Proctor stays or transfers? I think 100% transfers. I couldn't see him coming back for another year.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I'll go 99% because you just never say never on these things, but he seems like a likely transfer candidate for sure.
He's a guy that, again, we were really high on him. And again, when we're high on somebody, it's because somebody inside the Woody Hayes is saying, hey, this guy is really doing well. This guy's, watch out for this guy. This guy's a beast. Whatever. It's not because we like throw a dart and like hit, oh, let's, pimp this guy today. Like, that's not how it works. And I heard Josh Proctor's name a lot. And then Jim Knowles said that he could be the best safety in the country. And then after one drive, he never played again. So again, that was a weird one. It's, in the 20 years I've been around Ohio State football, that might be the weirdest one I've ever experienced. It reminded me a lot of Jamario O'Neal. Jamario O'Neal was a guy that was probably the earliest offer in Ohio State history up until, recruiting became crazy. But, in 2004 or 2003, Ohio State offered Jamario, and it was like before his sophomore year even started, when he was at Mansfield. Ends up going to Glenville. Started like at the first game of the year in 2006, and then he got benched and like never played again, like for like 3 years, like never played again. So it was weird. Like Jamario was a guy that when I saw how early he got offered, and when you meet the kid, he's super physically imposing, diesel, and I was like, this guy's gonna be like a 3-and-out Sean Taylor safety type, and he was not that. Really nice kid, but just he didn't play and wasn't good when he did play. So sometimes you just never know. Man, Steel Chambers future. We'll hit that one next. All right. Who do I have as QB1 for Ohio State? I mean, you got to go with McCord so far. He started a game versus Akron. If CJ would have broke a shoelace versus Georgia, and McCord's coming in, I didn't think there's a question. So as of now, it's got to be McCord. I think that, if you had to put odds on it, Nevada, the McCord Brown Derby, what kind of odds or percentages would you place on Kyle McCord taking the first snap next September when the season starts?
I'd probably say 80-20, probably 4-1.
No.
So yeah. I think he's, or I should say 1-4. I think he's a pretty heavy favorite to take the first snap, and but again, change. Let's see through the spring ball. Let's see who's doing things, and we may update those odds as we're kind of hearing things and as we're kind of going along.
Yeah, I agree. I think that'll be interesting, because I can't imagine that Kyle doesn't take the first snap when at every turn so far he's been the backup, or he's been, I think he played. I think it was something like he threw 16 passes. He was like 16 for 20 on the year, and like I think Devin Brown threw like 2 passes all year. So I mean, small sample size, but I just, he's a year older, year in the system. Went to high school with Marvin Harrison, who just happens to be the best receiver in the country, and he's our number 1. So I don't think that hurts him. But it'll be interesting. This is a great question, Nevada. What incoming freshman plays the most? That is a great question.
Brandon Innes. Brandon Innes, despite not coming in for the not coming in for spring ball. I mean, he's a day one kind of kid. You got to find a just go, you talked about J.J. Smith and wanted to put stuff on for that rainy day when you're looking to get pumped up. Well, go look at Brandon Innes. He's already signed. He's in the barn, and he's really excited. He looks NFL ready right now as a high school player, and he'll be a day one contributor in some way, shape, or form when he sets foot on campus.
Yeah, I agree. I'd go Ennis or I'd go one of the young corners. I mean, there's a bunch of them that are in here early, and those guys are going to get worn out during spring ball. So we'll see if any of them are left standing and want to take a spot. All right, Dave Rice, you're my man. You're always on here. Appreciate you. Kirk, with all the running backs, tight ends, and inexperienced line, and perhaps a more mobile QB will they use the running game more and effectively this season. That's how you win the Michigan game. I agree that you have to outrush your opponent in the Michigan game to win. I would run the ball a lot behind a young offensive line. I think that a way to protect them and kind of keep their confidence up is run the ball, because you can ask every offensive line on earth if they'd rather run block or pass block. They're all going to say run block because they get to be the aggressor, come off the rock. They're not retreating and vertically setting and pass blocking. So, and it's not like you're handing it to some schlubs. You're handing it to guys like Travion Henderson. And with Trey, if you hand it to him, he might go to the crib. He might go 75 yards and get the offensive line off the field and get everybody juiced up and celebrating. But, I'm always blessed that I played for Truss, who ran the old covered wagon offense where we handed it to Beanie about 35 times a game and you run for 180 yards and grind out a 21-7 victory or whatever. Because I think the twofold parts to running the ball effectively is that you keep the defense off the field, which is huge. Fewer plays generally means fewer scores, keeps them fresh. And two, it really helps your offensive line establish dominance. And I think that that's something that people don't see. I think people that are strictly Madden players or people that kind of just watch from their sofa on TV, they don't see that, the cumulative effect of coming off the ball and double teaming guys, it adds up. And I think, Michigan really embraces that because, their O-line in the first half, they were building those body blows up, and then all of a sudden, and the numbers were not pretty. I mean, we were stuffing them basically the entire first half, but by the fourth quarter, those things add up. And when, Teron Vincent's getting rocked out of there and Jerron Cage and some of these guys, like, that fourth quarter, once they've absorbed their 10th double team, they give a little bit more, and then that seam gets a little bit bigger. And then magically, you've got, 200 yards rushing in the second half or whatever it was. So, again, I think that Ryan gets a little too chuck and duckish for me, where he just wants to chuck and duck the whole way. And I don't think that puts the offensive line in the best position to win. Now, we get really sparkly, pretty numbers and big, gaudy stats, but the stats don't really win in November, and they haven't won in the playoffs. So, I think you have to establish the running game, especially with a young offensive line. Just depending on who wins out in the interior. If you put Tigre in there, who's a bigger guy, who can maul guys, I would happily run more tight zone, run more power, and really come off the ball in these D lines. But that's my opinion. Again, I'm an offensive lineman. I always try to put those guys in the best position for them to be successful. And I think that when you ask them to pass protect 60 times a game, that's just not it. I think if you ask them to have more of a 50-50 split, I think our offense would be much more productive. And the thing about developing a hardcore running game is it travels on the road, and it's also weatherproof. And guess what? Where do we have to go at the end of November? Ann Arbor. And guess what? It's probably going to be cold, and it might rain, and it might snow, or whatever. And when you can run the ball, you can do that in all weather. You can't throw it in all weather, but you can run it in all weather. So, like when it's windy at Northwestern, if you're a really good running team, doesn't matter. If it's rainy and snowy in Ann Arbor, doesn't matter. So I would just start that attitude now that, hey, this is what's going to happen. Because, again, I'm not going to go to the way back win machine, but in '07, when we went up to Michigan, pouring rain, 35 degrees. So it was freezing, snowy, sleety rain, impossible to throw the ball. So we just handed it to Beanie like 40 times and he ran for 220 yards and we won the game. So, when you're playing up in Ann Arbor, you just got to figure out a way to win. And I think that it's running and playing good defense. So, Nevada, your thoughts on running the ball? I think I know what your thoughts are on running the ball, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
They are. I think I'm with you about 90% of the way. But I thought the game plan that we called in the Georgia game was pretty ideal, and we came within a kick of beating Georgia and winning the national championship. So it's really hard to complain too much about the play mix or saying we can't win in the playoffs without it or whatever it is. I think Dave's kind of finding his way, and I thought it was interesting on one of the biggest plays of the year. He calls a run, and then everybody really wants to see a pass. So I think the running game is great when it works, and the passing game is great when it works, and when it doesn't, then you want the opposite. So, but I think Dave did a nice job against Georgia. That was the biggest challenge, and I'm confident it's going to be even better into 2023.
Yeah, I know the running play you're talking about. That's one that I'll break down. I'm going to get the coaches from pretty quicker. But yeah, that was of all the times where I wish we did the look back stuff that Ryan loves to do. That was the one where, man, if you could hit the rewind machine to say, hey, can we look back at this and see that they're bringing a double leg yet? But again, I'm sure Ryan's gone over that play in his head about 6,000 times by then. But any final thoughts? We've gone for about 70. We appreciate you guys so much. If you guys could hit that like button on the way out. We're gonna do this again tomorrow. So if we did not get to your question, bring it again tomorrow because we are loading up. And like I said, there's all kinds of stuff every day. There's new Ohio State stuff popping. Coaches on recruiting. So we'll give you a report about where guys are. Jim Knowles is actually up in Canton, up in my neck of the woods today. Keenan Bailey's down in Georgia, kind of scouring the country to get to all of these big time guys before we get the dead period before the second signing day. But bang that like button, hit subscribe. We appreciate you guys as always. Nevada, any closing remarks as we wrap this thing up?
No, just excited to see the impact of Brian Hartline on the offense in the spring ball, and be interesting to see if we can see his fingerprints on it. But that's going to be a very developing story that we're going to be following closely here over the next few weeks. So stay tuned.
I totally agree. It's going to be it'll be fascinating to see how he works his fingerprints on the running game, and if he goes more vertical in the passing game, if he has a deeper rotation at receiver. Million questions, and we're going to be getting answers for those daily. So thank you, Nevada. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you guys, as always. If you enjoyed the show, again, please leave us a like. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. Those are huge for us. Help people find the show. Again, we appreciate you guys so much. We love doing this with you guys. Love the questions. You guys bring fantastic questions, so thank you guys so much for that. We love doing this stuff. We love breaking down some film, talking football. We know that it's kind of the off season, but on BuckeyeScoop.com, it's never the off season. If you are one of the biggest Ohio State fans in the world and you're looking for people like you, BuckeyeScoop.com is your home. We have some fantastic people on there, fresh content every day, inside information from the Woody Hayes, recruiting information from Bill the Bank Green. Likely going to get Bank on here later on tonight. Hit another podcast with him. So I hope you guys enjoy this. We appreciate you guys so much. You guys are awesome. So thank you guys for that. I am going to jump on BuckeyeScoop.com. So if you have not subscribed to that, I suggest you do, because I think it is a fantastic thing to have on your phone and check all night, all day. We appreciate you guys that are already members of the Scoop family. So thank you guys. That being said, as always, thank you so much, Buckeye Nation, and thank you, Scoop family. You guys are the best. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Heading over to the message boards on BuckeyeScoop.com, so I will be there for the rest of the night, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Go Bucks.